edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein, and joining us from the Locked On Chargers podcast, this is the crossover with David Drogemeyer and Daniel Wade. Gentlemen, I know it hasn't been too long since the last time that we talked, but damn it, it always is great when we can have the quad box of the Chargers Unleashed crew and the Locked On Chargers crew. This is what it's all about. These are the type of conversations that we love to have, especially in June, when we're just itching for football content at every place that we can find it. The Chargers wrap up mandatory minicamp this week. We're obviously going to delve into that. A lot of opinions and perspectives from David and Daniel as it relates to what has taken place with the Chargers since the draft over the last couple of months and where things are headed for the 2024 season. So lots to get into. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
I'm doing great. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing phenomenal. I mean, it's a great time to be a Chargers fan. It's a great time to be covering the Chargers. I feel like there's a lot of optimism, and I think there's plenty of reason to be optimistic about where this team is going under Jim Harbaugh, Joe Hortiz, and this new Chargers regime.
100%. It's exciting times. I know Chargers fans, we're not used to having nice things, and we're seeing so many decisions and implications and ramifications of all of these good things come to fruition as the weeks and months have gone by since Jim Harbaugh was brought in. So to answer the question, Jake, I am doing fantastic. How are you, Jake? You're the only one that hasn't answered this.
Wolkenstein, I don't think you've ever been in a bad mood. Number one, okay,
That's always
the
That's
chipper.
100% not true.
You're always the chipper of the bunch. Come on, you're the optimist. I am the resident pessimist of the group. There's no surprise there. I'm doing fine. I'm excited for this evening. It is always a blast. I'm always is the excitement not seeping through my pores enough? Do you need me to get closer to the camera? It's always a blast when we have the Locked On Chargers crew on here for a crossover episode. The conversations just are always the best.
Well, let's get the crossover crossed over. Let's just kind of set the table here. We got a lot of fun topics to discuss. We kind of want to get your perspective on just like the new regime and what you've noticed is kind of the big rocks of differences between now and of times of past. We'll talk about Camp Pendleton, which I think a lot of us were excited as Chargers fans about, position groups that may need to improve, what we're buying or selling, some of the hype, offense and defensive expectations, position battles, the whole nine. But David, Dan, you guys have been doing this a long time, longer than we have. And you've seen multiple regimes come and go. Jim Harbaugh, Joe Hortiz, this new era. We've all kind of talked about it ad nauseum, but like overall, what is, in your opinions, the biggest difference between what we've seen to date in the Jim Harbaugh, Joe Hortiz era and what we've seen in past GM/new coach era, which, if we're being honest, was Tom Telesco plus head coach of your choosing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, let's be thankful that this is an offseason we can get excited about, right? I mean, the Chargers keep pretty much every coach for 4 years. Like, there was a non-zero chance we were getting a Brandon Staley offseason. And coming from a guy that records 5 episodes a week, 46 weeks out of the year, I did not want to have a Brandon Staley offseason. Just, hey, can he do it? Should he be gone? Why is he still here? Jim Harbaugh, we did 15 straight shows with him on the thumbnail. So this is a much better offseason than we could have had. I think when you're talking about what the differences are, it's hard to say. I mean, because it is such a broad question, right? Like as far as like free agency went, we didn't see the J.C. Jacksons or the Brian Bulagas, right? Or even the Corey Linsleys, any of those big contracts. We saw a ton of one-year deals. We're not going to jeopardize what we have going on in the future. We're going to do what's financially reasonable this year, but also do whatever we can to fill as many holes as possible and build as much depth as possible. You get to the draft. We're not taking Delmar Glaze in the 3rd round randomly when no one's ever heard of him. Maybe that's a real player. I don't know. It might be the Raiders' 3rd round pick. I'm not sure. I've never heard of him.
Yeah.
We saw them be sensible as far as where they took players, getting guys of great value later on in the draft, the Brandon Rices, the Cornelius Johnsons, the Cam Harts, all of those guys. And when they were up in the 3rd round, they took a dude who might be the best linebacker in the draft, right? A guy that maybe shouldn't even have been there in the 3rd round available to them. They filled needs, but they took guys that deserved to go there without making huge, obvious reaches. So I think there are a lot of differences. I think at least from the Joe Hortiz side, those are the biggest ones that I've noticed early on.
Yeah, I think for me it's twofold. It's a level of professionalism in the way that things have been ran, as far as from the head, the top, all the way down. I feel like ownership is really on board now. Like, and they've proven that with the money that they've invested. Going out to get the head coach with the experience in Jim Harbaugh, going out and getting a Joe Hortiz, because Joe Hortiz would have never left Baltimore if not for this opportunity to be working with Jim Harbaugh. I think that's something we have to point out. I mean, he was in a very, very high up position with Baltimore, and I'm sure he was getting paid plenty of money. I mean, there was really no reason for him to jump out and leave unless it was a really very rare situation. And now I feel like with ownership investing that type of capital, allowing him and Jim Harbaugh to run things the way they want to, that shows kind of a level of change in professionalism in the way they're doing things. And then the other theme that you hear just from every single player is the attention to detail. It is at a completely different level under Jim Harbaugh and his coaching staff. Everyone's talking about it. And when everybody's talking about it, that means it's a theme. It's something that's happening. And I think when you focus on those little details, those small, minute changes, those start to stack up and turn into bigger, more impactful changes. So I think those are the two things that stick out to me right away.
Yeah, and the details, right? It's like the little things become the big things. And you hear so many players talk about how you wouldn't necessarily think, how to certainly tie your shoes or how to put the weights back would translate to game days. But like, it's a mentality, right? And that's just details on pre-game random stuff in the locker room, let alone attention to detail of how you're going to execute a certain block or how you're going to be going down during specific plays as a receiver. Like I agree with you. I think the details, all of you, obviously, but I think the part is just like, for me, and Jake and I have talked about this, like the brain trust that is now within the coaching staff. And you see it, and I was talking to Jake about this yesterday, you see it in that Navarro Bowman mic'd up, where not only are you seeing a Navarro Bowman as a Chargers coach now, which is wild, along with like Nick Hardwick, but there's 30-something coaches on the staff right now. And you're seeing players resonate with those coaches. But not only that, you have this brain trust of coaches that are able to kind of collaborate and bring out the best for the team. And so you're seeing Navarro Bowman, for example, out there coaching it up with the players, getting them all like very specific, detail oriented with how they're moving throughout plays and drills. And then you're seeing the coaching staff at the end of it going up to Navarro Bowman and talking to him about like, now you're not an all pro anymore. I'm paraphrasing. You can't go out there and be an all pro, but you can see your players develop, and that's what your reward is. And so it's cool just to see the coaches not only coach the players, but help kind of bring the best and most out of each other. And so all of this feels different. And that kind of goes into, I think the next part of this is you're seeing a lot of themes here throughout mini camps and OTAs. And even this week, they go down to Camp Pendleton. There's purposeful decisions being made throughout the offseason. And there's a method to the madness of all of the things that we've seen. And it comes out eventually. Talk to us about what your thoughts were on the Camp Pendleton thing, which I think all of us were San Diego Chargers, lived in San Diego at one point. And then also maybe your biggest takeaways from the mandatory portion that we've seen so far this week.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I think, the fact that they're understanding that there's still a large fan base in San Diego and trying to connect those two, maybe right some wrongs. I really truly feel like the way that the Chargers separated from San Diego was the wrong way to go about it. I feel like they burned a lot of bridges in the way that they did it. They wanted a clean break. They wanted to jump. They were full force focused on LA, and that's all their mind was at, where they were going. And I feel like they could have handled that a little bit more delicately than they did. And so I think this is an opportunity for them to, and I really feel like this is Jim Harbaugh here. I feel like this is a decision that he made. I mean, obviously, I don't know that. That's just me, guessing. That's what I feel. I would agree. But I feel like this is something that he decided to say, hey, we need to reach out. We need to try to do something to try to connect, the fan bases in San Diego to, where they're at in Los Angeles and just kind of, reach out with an olive branch and say, hey, we understand where we spent 56 years of our history, and we want to try to try to mend some fences. And I feel like it's a positive thing. I understand there's a lot of hurt out there, and understandably and rightfully so, right? I mean, they were there for a very, very long time. But I personally love it. Obviously, I'm an Army veteran, so seeing them go out there and be with the Marines and their families and spending some quality time, inviting all of them down to watch at the field level, I feel like that's a very special moment, special situation, and I'm very proud to be a Chargers fan and to be, somebody covering the team, seeing them reach out and do something like that.
Yeah, I agree on pretty much every front. I do think it's super bittersweet in a certain way, right? Because it's like you're going down to San Diego, and San Diego is where we all grew up,
Yes.
where we started loving this team. So it is a little bittersweet because that's about as close as, they're going to get to San Diego, playing in San Diego, right? But I also think just like, to do that, these are very important periods. They get very, very limited time. They weren't going to Camp Pendleton to get, the resolve of the Marines there and have a super focused practice. They went there to do a cool thing, and they did, right? Having Jim Harbaugh have all the families and those things, like breaking down the fence and just basically saying, hey, come on down, right? Like, you don't see that very much where you're just letting 5,000 people kind of run amok amongst, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of players. It just doesn't happen a lot like that. So to see all of those families' days made, to see, people that are in our armed services get to have their day made, to get their, fatigue signed, to get their kind of whatever they have, their Chargers footballs, all that stuff. Like, those are memories that last a lifetime. I think it was a really, really cool thing to do. I hope we see something like that every year. Hopefully that becomes a tradition again, where they're doing things like that every year. So it is bittersweet, I think, for San Diegans for sure. I live in San Diego. I know the Chargers fans are still out there. We talk about it all the time. I'm a bartender. I'm talking about it all day. But to have them come down and show a bit of an olive branch, right, to kind of open the pathways a little bit, I think is absolutely a positive thing.
Jake, did you think, or did you see that as an olive branch to San Diego, or did you see that as something to the military, or was it both?
I think it was a little bit of both. To David's point, the way that they left, still, we know from hearing, listening to it on social media, yes, but we still see the after effects of it today. That there are people that are still hurt by it, and to see that, and I fully agree with David that it was also a Jim Harbaugh decision for that to take place. Everybody that was in attendance deserved every bit of that. And I wish, from a standpoint, even from outside all the service people that were there, that it could have been a bigger venue just for a little bit more fans to come and enjoy that type of a moment, because this was the essence of this team for so long. And for Harbaugh, who once played in the city of San Diego for the Chargers, I think this was a very personal thing to him, and to give back to the military and those families, I thought was a beautiful thing. But just to show, just from a standpoint of being personable to fans, I think that was the extension of everything else. So you wish it could have been on different terms. You wish that there could have been more people in attendance for a moment like that. But for Jim Harbaugh and the team to go out and do something like that for the military and those fans that were in attendance, it was awesome.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, this is one of those, build it and they will come. If this team starts winning, they will come up to LA for football games. And I have no doubt in my mind. And I don't know about you guys, but San Diego, I believe, has more downloads for us than LA County. San Diego County has more than LA County for us as as Chargers Unleashed. Chargers fans are here in San Diego. Like, make no mistake about it. But it's tough. It's a bittersweet thing, and it takes time. Winning cures a lot, though. And I think that's what Chargers fans are excited about with this new era of Chargers football. Let's get into kind of the offseason players, some discussions in terms of like expectations. OTAs, mandatory now, perfect attendance. We had the OTAs as well. What do you believe is maybe the biggest storyline so far that's come out of not training camp, but OTAs, mandatory or voluntary?
There's a lot of different names for the practices in the off seasons. I think we could do without. We could simplify it. We don't need OTAs and mini camps and training camps. Too many things, too many names of things. To me, it's always hard, right? Because you're talking about no pads on or anything. I have liked the fact that, like, I think maybe the Brandon Staley era convinced me that you weren't allowed to go 11 on 11 at this time of the year. I don't know. Maybe before that I knew you were allowed to, but I kind of like how they just jumped into it, even though there's only so much you're going to get, from the linemen and the trenches and things like that when you don't have any pads on. But I like, getting out there and just doing it the real way, doing it as close to real as you possibly can at that point of the year. The one name that keeps popping up to me is Ladd McConkey. We had Chris Rim on the show. He brought up Ladd McConkey. Daniel Popper has done an excellent job for The Athletic, documenting every practice he's been at. Seems like Ladd McConkey is a fixture there as far as, hey, this connection is growing, which I don't think is a small thing, because if we think back to last year, by the time we got to the regular season, the connection between Quentin Johnston and Justin Herbert wasn't there yet. Quentin Johnston obviously went into training camp behind Josh Palmer and Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. He wasn't getting a ton of those first team reps. Ladd McConkey, day one, was the slot starter for this offense. And I love the fact that that relationship is already starting to build. So I think, durability, things like that, there are some concerns. But I think if you're talking about guys who have stood out at OTA so far, I think it would be Ladd McConkey's the guy that I keep hearing about at least.
David, for you, what would you say is the biggest storyline? Or maybe if you want to look at it a different way, biggest pleasant surprise, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's just been like the attendance, like the amount of players that have showed up and have been there throughout the offseason. And I feel like because there's that level of excitement, that level of change, knowing that, you have a real legitimate head coach in this league that has won and has, real experience. And, the gigantic staff that he brought along with him. I feel like the players are excited about it, and they really truly feel like they expect to win. Like, they are going to win. Jim Harbaugh says, like, I want the expectations to be sky high, right? Because if you're afraid of expectations, then you're afraid to compete. And I love that, right? From, a Chargers fan that, has not seen their team win the division in 15 years, right? I want to get back on top of the mountain. I want to dethrone the Chiefs. I want to be the kings of the AFC West again. And I feel like for the first time in a very, very long time, we finally have the right guy that can get us there a lot sooner and a lot more effectively than anybody else that was coaching this team the last, 10, 12 years.
Yeah, and I think I want to change my answer. I want to go with gold jersey. That's my answer now. The gold jersey is the biggest storyline for me. The fact that they get Justin Herbert to go out there and wear a golden jersey when not any of the other quarterbacks.
Which he did not want that.
Jim Harbaugh told us he didn't want it, right? Which is the least surprising thing in the world, that Justin Herbert wouldn't want to be the one dude who has literally a arrow pointing down on him in the middle of every practice, because he is shining in a golden jersey. But I also love it. I love the golden jersey, and I love the fact that Jim Harbaugh's like, what are you going to do? Everyone has to stay away from quarterbacks. We just want you to stay a little further away from this specific quarterback. And like I talked about, I think we literally brought up on the show, like, we're coming from, the Anthony Lynn days of, hey, he's a backup for a reason. You know what I mean? So to see Herbert now get continually propped up and praised the way that Jim Harbaugh has, to the extent of giving him a golden jersey to wear on the practice field, so really no one gets anywhere near him. I've changed my answer to that.
Just make sure that you can stay 2 yards away from all the other quarterbacks, but for Justin, it's 2.5 to 3. Okay, right. Just make sure you know that.
Yeah, for Justin, lots has been done to improve and turn a weakness, some would argue, into a strength. Specifically, looking at the offensive line, and just this week, Jim Harbaugh seems to have told us that the starting five is basically set, except he did kind of have like an asterisk. I forget exactly the word he used when he talked about Trey Pipkins.
Probably.
Yeah. There's a term he used ahead of it that he kind of gave himself an out just in case, but I think it was right now. Right now, Trey Pipkins is one of the starting five, but we know the starting five. Jake, I'm going to go to you first on this. What are your expectations of the offensive line, if that is a starting five? Like, are you expecting them to be a dominant offensive line out of the gate? Like, where do you see maybe strengths and weaknesses of this offensive line?
This should be the starting five that we expected ever since Joe Alt was fifth selection of the NFL draft. But I do think that there are going to still be some growing pains. However, when you look at how bad the offensive line has been for Justin Herbert over the last 2 years, the bar hasn't necessarily been set astronomically high. So the improvement that you should see should still be considerable. Joe Alt will probably go through a little bit of growing pains considering that he's moving from the left to the right side. Trey Pipkin's moving into a different position. While I feel like that will be advantageous for him, having Joe Alt to his right and Bradley Bozeman to his left, there's still going to be some growing pains there. But in general, as a whole, you would hope from a cohesiveness standpoint, and Jim Harbaugh having this message of finding the best five to put out there. Seemingly, we've heard that same message going all the way back to Mike McCoy. I remember him saying the exact same thing, and it feels like we've been just retooling this line for the better part of a decade now. But from what you have now as a staple of Rashawn Slater, Zion Johnson going into his third season, Bradley Bozeman, obviously, who's a seasoned veteran with the Chargers, definitely – you lost that when Corey Linsley went down last year. You saw what effects took place when he was out of the game. Trey Pipkins moving over to a new position, and a big time for him because he's in year 2 of another contract extension, and it is not necessarily guaranteed for him beyond that. And then Joe Alt coming into it at his size and what he could possibly do on the edge considering his success that he had in the left side of Notre Dame. So you have to have nice expectations for it. It can't get much worse, but at the same time, let's still be real. There are still going to be some hiccups every now and then, but from the standpoint of keeping Justin Herbert upright and relying a lot on this run game, everything should move better.
David, I think I'll ask you this then, and maybe ask differently. Like, what is the bar of expectations for you? Like, what is, at minimum, what this offensive line to be this year?
Well, I mean, I guess if we're quantifying it, I would like to be somewhere in, the 10 to 15 range. I think would be something that I would like to see. I do feel like it is going to be much improved because they're going to be running the football a lot more and a lot more effectively, which in turn is going to help them pass blocking as well. Because I feel like every offensive line wants to come downhill. They want to go straight forward. They want to be moving forward. And that's what Greg Roman is going to be doing. He's going to be running the football. He's going to be establishing that. And so when he does establish that running game, that's going to open up when they do pass, have to pass block and they have to do go play action. They're going to be in much better situations to be able to do that because the defense just can't key in on what they were doing. The balance was so lacking the last couple of years, and that hurt the offensive line and their blocking as well. So I feel like the play calling and the blocking schemes and the way that they're running the football is going to improve the entire unit.
So Daniel, I'll ask you this then. The run blocking was horrendous this past year and for years now. And that could be offensive line as well as scheme, as well as the tight ends that also were attributing to that. Do you see, I know Greg Roman is like this running game savant, right? Do you see this team turning that glaring weakness into a strength this soon?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think because that's all I've ever seen. From Greg Roman's offense, like no matter what situation he's ever been in, he has had a top rushing offense. Like that just it's almost automatic with him. So it does scare me to have that kind of faith in something we haven't seen yet. I do think that there is, to what Jake was saying, like there are some reasonable questions. There are definitely questions about how much can some of these guys improve. Did you get enough legitimate competition for a Zion Johnson who struggled, right? Did you get enough competition for Trey Pipkins? Like, are you giving Jamari Sawyer enough of a chance there before he's even getting pads on to say that Trey Pipkins has separated himself? But I do think the running game is going to be much better. I do think that when you see Greg Roman and the teams that he's had, whether it's Buffalo or the 49ers or the Ravens, like all of those teams have been in top 10 rushing units. So I do think it's going to be much improved. I think the commitment's going to be a lot greater there, and I think that's going to help. And I also think that you went out and got someone like a Will Dissly for a reason, right? You went out and got guys like Brendan Rice and Cornelius Johnson and bigger bodies in that position room for a reason. And that is one of the biggest things as far as run blocking and just how well your running game works is there's so many different parts to it. Like it is the offensive line, and they're always going to take the biggest share of the blame. Probably rightfully so, right? I mean, that is the tip of the spear for the most part. But the tight ends were atrocious. Like, I mean, it was really, really bad from that unit. The wide receivers, you weren't getting nearly enough from those guys. So even the good, decent runs never had a chance to turn into great runs because the blocking down the field wasn't right. the scheme didn't feel like it ever was fully understood any of the last 3 seasons in the Brandon Staley era. So I am bullish on the fact that, hey, Greg Roman's here now. We heard the running game was going to be a lot better under Kellen Moore. It never happened. But I do think under Greg Roman, we will see this team turn into at least a top 15 rushing attack. But if it's anything like what Greg Roman's been able to do in the past, it feels like it'll be a letdown if it's not top 10.
Jake returned with light. Incredible. Jake,
Let there be
back.
light.
Let there be light.
And also, like you were just talking about, with the Chargers offensive line that has gone through technical difficulties for 10 years, sometimes it happens with me. So we're back.
I mean, yeah, honestly, I was watching myself on the camera, so I didn't even realize that Jake was gone. But I think that when you're talking about this offensive line, we can't forget where we came from, right? When Justin Herbert started, you're talking about at center, Dan Feeney, next to him, Forrest Lamb, next to him, right? We're talking about guys like Storm Norton, right? Like it's come a long, long ways. Now you're talking about an offensive line that has 3 first-round picks on it. Joe Hall, a top 5 pick. You have Rashawn Slater, a top 13 pick, and Zion Johnson, a top 17 pick to go along with a 3rd rounder and Trey Pipkins, and a guy in Bradley Bozeman who's already well outplayed where he was drafted. So I don't want to take that for granted at all. The Chargers, it looks a lot different from Justin Herbert than when he started.
I was worried, Jake, that you didn't pay the bills. So let's make sure that we do pay the bills. Your lights were off for a bit. So let's make sure we pay the bills. Let's talk about our friends before we get into most improved position group.
Want to remind everybody that BetOnline remains your #1 source for all your summer sports this season, from baseball, golf, NBA, and the NHL playoffs. All the latest stats, news, and scores available for you to follow for all your favorite teams. Get on in on the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head on over to the website today. That's betonline.ag, or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Going over to BetOnline and use the promo code UNLEASHED. That's BetOnline, where the game starts.
So much has been changed in one offseason. Players gone, players in free agency brought in the draft, coaching staff revamped. So many position groups to choose from here. So we can't use the same one. So we have 4 options here.
Okay.
We'll go quick rapid fire here for a bit. Most improved position group. Daniel, start with you.
Oh, should I go with a more obscure one to make it easier on you guys? I mean,
no,
most improved is a tougher one. I mean, I know me and David have covered this on the show as well. I mean, we were going through it. I'm like, man, like there's not a lot where you know for sure, right? I'll go with one maybe a little bit more obscure just because I know they lost a good player there, and that's the tight end room. I'm very keen and bullish on the tight end room from where it was last year. And I love Gerald Everett. Trust me. I mean, I was a big Gerald Everett advocate. But like, I do think that if Hayden Hurst, right, or even the combination of Hayden Hurst and maybe Donald Parham, whatever that room ends up looking like there as far as who they think the receiving options are, if Hayden Hurst can be 80% of Gerald Everett, but then you also get Will Dissly, who's clearly one of the best blocking tight ends in the National Football League, that's a huge improvement to me. Like, right, you also have Ben Mason, who's floating around there. Like, a very... Like, I know Hayden Hurst, everyone wants to bring up the run blocking grades and stuff like that. Like, Hayden Hurst in most of his career has been a better run blocking tight end than most of the Chargers tight ends have over the last 3 years, I promise you. So don't get too caught up in that one terrible Carolina Panthers year. You know, we're just going to have to throw out the 2023 Carolina Panthers season when we're talking about these new Chargers players. Did they get more Carolina Panthers than I wanted? Yes, of course. You know, it's a 2-15 team we're talking about. But
with the rookie quarterback, which makes a lot of things look different.
Exactly. Yeah, no, 100%. But like if Hayden Hurst, who I think can, right? I mean, he would have to have a substantial bounce back from the seasons he's having health-wise and production-wise. If he can be 80% of the receiver that Gerald Everett was, and Will Dissly can be 150 to 200% of the blocker that Gerald Everett was, like I think that is a huge improvement, and I think it's a much more well-balanced room.
David, what's your answer? Most improved.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the linebacker position. I think the linebacker position is a lot better this year. You know, so subtract Kenneth Murray, who got the contract of the century for the play that he was able to provide. Kudos to his agent. And obviously Eric Hendricks, who, I mean, I think played a little bit better towards the back end of the season. But, you know, you eject them, you bring back Denzel Perryman, who we all know is a heat-seeking missile against the run. You're able to, you know, bring in Troy Dye, which I think will play a little bit on defense as well as, you know, adding to special teams. getting Deion Henley more of a platform to be on defense, to actually play. I'm very, very excited about that. I really love his game. I feel like he has a very well-rounded game. He can cover, he can tackle, he can shed blocks. I feel like he is in for a breakout type of year. And of course, bringing in Junior Colson, who is absolutely perfect for this situation. I mean, I don't know how many players out there, offense or defense, that gets to take their same defensive scheme or offensive scheme from college and pretty much the entire coaching staff and bring it to the NFL level, with his intimate knowledge of the defense and, you know, being able to have his coaching staff here at the NFL level. I don't think anybody else is in a better position to succeed right away than Junior Colson. So I'm going to go the linebacker position.
Hefner, what's yours? No linebacker being able to be used or tight end. What say you?
You still might even think that I'm going for low-hanging fruit here, but I'm going to go with the running back position. And I think this is by huge.
I mean, they were terrible last year, so
by
it's
a
okay
huge committee. Is this going to be a lot better? Obviously, you finally move on from Austin Eckler, who gave you 2 really good years. Over the 2 out of the last 3 were really good from a fantasy perspective of him. But we know how badly this Chargers run game has suffered. And for the longest time that we were always asking, who's going to be the second guy behind Austin Eckler that's going to step up to give this running back room some help? And we never found anybody. Nobody was up to the task in doing so. So now you go out and you bring in Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, guys who are very familiar with Greg Roman's system and what they could do in that running back room. Isaiah Spiller, who Dan and I have talked about, is possibly even – I don't know where you would slot him in terms of the roster as it stands right now, because you may have to keep 6 wide receivers. You may all of a sudden be at a position where you can't keep 4, but I think his running style is perfect for this scheme. And then you go out and you get Kamani Vidal. Dan, we just heard Greg Roman at the stand today talking about the differences that they're going to be hitting defenses with when they run the ball, because not only are you going to run the ball a lot, but you're going to hit them with a different flavor every time that you do it. And all of this, of course, is going to help Justin Herbert in the long run. So the combination between coach and revamp personnel for the run game, you have to be excited for what they're going to do from a running back by committee standpoint.
I'm gonna change the game here for a second, and so instead of being most improved position group, I'm gonna go with the position group who I think has the most to prove.
That's so convenient, that one. The biggest ones get taken that Dan doesn't now want to answer the question.
Like, I'm not gonna. Let's go ahead and move this show along a little bit here.
I thought edge rusher was the easiest answer, honestly.
That was what I was gonna go with, but I thought it was just too easy. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but Dan, it's fine. If you don't have an answer, that's okay. I
mean, it's your show.
Well, I can go a few different ways. And the answer that I have, I think, honestly, can be both. So, you know what? I'm going to be able to answer
I'm just dragging this along. Dan's trying to move things.
No. Offensive line, honestly. I think we know how impactful the Joe Alt selection was. And bringing Bradley Bozeman in. Now, he's not Corey Linsley, but Corey Linsley didn't play much last year. So I'm comparing him to who did play last year. Pair that with a Greg Roman coaching staff and a Jim Harbaugh style of offense. Pair that with a running scheme and an identity that we know this team is going to try to become, and, you know, God willing, I don't see how this offensive line will not be better and much better and more effective is probably the better way of putting it. So I think that is the group that should be the most improved, because that's what everyone has told us from the entire coaching staff is most important. Most paramount is protecting Justin Herbert, keeping him upright, establish a balanced offense, and run the ball. That requires an offensive line to do all of those things. And that's why they went out and got Joe Alt and Bradley Bozeman. That's why Trey Pipkins is making $9 million as a quote-unquote backup tackle or starting guard, because they want this offensive line to be dominant. But that also means they have to prove it. Like, there's a lot at stake for this offensive line. And if the offensive line crumbles, the entire thing crumbles. Because that's the thing that has plagued this team, has been the offensive line, the ability to protect Justin Herbert in key situations, establish a running game, block for your running backs. All of that has to be proven to be successful this year, or Chargers are going to look silly. Period. So offensive line would be my answer for both. Wow. Most improved, who I believe, and the one who has the most to prove. Jake,
masterclass.
Position group most to prove. Who has the most to prove?
I would have to say that this is the cornerback group. Even though what you have with Asante Samuel Jr., this is going into his contract year, and obviously there has still been some things that has been missing from his game that we have seen since he was drafted. And now with virtually all the revamp that you've had in the secondary, with drafting 4 corners over the last 2 years between Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard, now with Tarheeb Still and Cam Hart, and you add Kristian Fulton into that mix, this is a lot of youth. There's some 1-year prove-it free agents that you're now having that hopefully you can find a reclamation project in Kristian Fulton, but there's still a lot of question marks. Now, what I do like about this is you go back to Steve Clinkscale when he was talking about the secondary and what he wants from these guys to be more versatile. He wants them to play both the outside and the slot, which I love in terms of creating competition, because who's going to come in and to say, who's going to win this? Is the battle of slot going to be between Tarheeb Still, Jasir Taylor, and then what are you going to do with Asante Samuel Jr.? Because we all know that he can play both of those type of positions. So it's just breeding more competition. But at the end of the day, I think that's also going to weed out some of your weak links of that group. But there's still a lot of question marks as it relates to this secondary. And I know that we all share the opinion that they may not be done adding to this group before the season starts. So keep an eye out when it comes to the end of preseason for every team, because the Chargers could still add to another cornerback before the season begins.
Well, since Jake stole my answer, I'm going to go and switch to the offensive side. Instead of the the guys that are trying to prevent you from catching the football, it's to the guys that have to catch the football, and that's the wide receiver position. I think there's also a ton of uncertainty in that group. There's a lot of bodies in that room, a lot of guys that are trying to fight for their spot on this roster. Can Quentin Johnston, take off in his sophomore season? Can, DJ Chark establish himself as, one of the top receivers? What is Joshua Palmer going to look like? How are they going to utilize Ladd McConkey? Who's going to make the back end of that wide receiver group? Is it going to be Brendan Rice? Is it going to be Cornelius Johnson? There is a lot of names there, and I feel like that's going to be one of the most fierce position group battles in all of training camp for the Chargers before it's all said and done.
I like both those answers. I think as far as the cornerbacks go, you are really hoping for a bounce back with Kristian Fulton, right? And I think the other thing, just big picture-wise, who do you have in that room in 2025 and beyond? Look at it. Asante Samuel Jr. is going into his last season. Kristian Fulton, 1-year deal. Next year you're going to be looking at a room that's filled with Cam Hart, Tarheeb Still. We have no idea what they're going to be yet. Dean Leonard and Jasir Taylor. Those are the guys you have there under contract right now. So I think big picture-wise, there's a lot of questions there, and the Chargers are showing a ton of faith in a bounce back from Kristian Fulton, and also that Asante Samuel Jr. can kind of even things out a little bit, right? The dude's brightest moment is a 3-interception playoff game, and he's never even really had more than that in a full season of regular season games. So seeing that evolve, I think you'd be a lot better with the cornerback room with Asante Samuel Jr., the give and take of, hey, if you can be an elite ball producer, right, I'm okay that you're not going to be able to do certain things, and you're going to have some liabilities in the running game and things like that, right? Because Jesse Minter's corners tackle, right? That's a big thing. Asante Samuel Jr., the tackling is an issue. The run defense and just being where he's supposed to be is as much of an issue. I know everyone wants to focus on the tackling. It's filling the right hole. 4th and 1, Jacksonville Jaguars, Travis Etienne, end of story. He wasn't where he needed to be, right? But people underestimate, they think it's just the tackling. It's not. It's being in the right place. Run defense has more to do with, turning guys back to the rest of your defense, having the right leverage, doing all those things. So the cornerback room, I agree with. The wide receiver room, for sure, and I think a lot of it has to do with the shoes that you're filling, right? No one's going to be Keenan Allen. No one's going to be able to be Mike Williams. And I think Mike Williams goes in the Corey Linsley pile of, hey, you can't really hold that receiver room up against this receiver room, because it was really 13 games of Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer missing 6-7 games, and then everyone else behind it. So to say, oh, well, you lost Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, a little disingenuous, at least as far as the 2023 group versus the 2024 group, because you didn't have Mike Williams last year. But those are still giant shoes to fill. For me, I'm going interior defensive line. And this is just a position for me where I guess it's kind of a lot to prove, but it's really just I don't know what to expect from those dudes. And they're going to have to prove to me that they did enough there to have a competent unit, because I think you look at that, and I love Morgan Fox, but Morgan Fox is what Morgan Fox is, right? He's a really good pass rushing interior defensive lineman. I don't know if you have a full-time above average player in that room right now. We'll see what happens with Justin Aboigbe, but everywhere else on the roster, you can point to it and I can say, hey, that guy should be average to above average full-time starter there. Who is that right now in the interior defensive line? I don't know who it is. It's a lot of guys.
Daniel, do you think, because the coaching staff, Jim Harbaugh, a few people have like really hyped up the interior defensive line as like a strength of that team. Are you buying that, or is that just like him hyping up his guys in your opinion?
It's somewhere in the middle. Like I think he probably was really afraid of what he had in that room, and then maybe he saw some things there that he liked. So it's like, oh my God, well maybe it won't be the worst group in the league. But like I literally on the last show we did for Locked On, it was like Jim Harbaugh saying this is a really, really good group, and then it was like an FTN post about LA Football Network posting about how the Chargers interior defensive line was ranked 32nd out of 32 teams in the NFL. So I think there's a lot of disconnect between what Jim Harbaugh is saying and where that group actually is. I think it can be better than 32nd in the league, but I think that's another position group where it's like the big addition's Poona Ford, free agency-wise. The biggest addition in the draft is Justin Aboigbe, who I love, and he wasn't on my radar before the draft, right? But like a dude who I never saw go backwards in college, right? Like the dude is as sturdy as it gets. But still, like you're hoping for a huge jump from Scott Matlock and Tito Abonia, and for Justin Aboigbe to play meaningful snaps for you, for Morgan Fox to be an all-around player that you don't need to be an every down defensive lineman, and for Poona Ford, who played 150 snaps last year, to be a meaningful part of that room.
It's tough. It's tough, but I think having an edge group that is as deep as it is, I think will make that interior defensive line
they're banking on
easier.
But you still got to get to those situations, Dan. That's my biggest thing, right? Because it's like, how are you going to use your four horsemen or whatever the name is? Because everyone wants to name this group of four edge rushers. How do you use those guys if other teams are in 3rd and 1, right? Well, if other teams are even not even getting to 3rd down because they're ripping off 7 yards of carry. So that's where I'm thinking is, can the defensive line be good enough so you can get the full use of those crazy, crazy edge rushers? To me, the best group in the league.
And that is fair. And I think the part that this staff is probably banking on, and I think Chargers fans should be very grateful for, is the fact that at least 3 of the 4, and you can argue that Bud Dupree's in there too, are all very good two-way players on defense. They can play against the run and the pass from the edge group specifically. And Bud Dupree is like a dirty work type of guy, bring a lunch pail, make
no questions about the edge group. The edge group all can defend the run. The edge group can all rush the passer. It's all about the interior. And I think the thing that gives me some solace is like, who did you lose? Right? Like you had Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson getting huge snaps. The dudes weren't good for the Chargers.
They were not good for us.
Straight up, they weren't good. So it's not like you lost a bunch there. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say anyone, just got their money and, rested on their laurels. If David wants to say that and, call out the character, that's fine. I'm not calling out their character at all. Just think they didn't play well. Like whether it's scheme, whether Brandon Staley didn't put them in the best positions, whatever it is, they were just bad. So like you didn't lose very much in that, in that position group. So you will get more snaps for maybe some guys who should have gotten more snaps last year. You get Justin Aboigbe and Poona Ford in that room. I like some of those guys, and I think I'm higher on some of those guys than others, but I still think that it's like the Chargers are banking on a whole lot from that room that are total unknowns at this point in the offseason.
And that's fair. And that's fair. And I think what I'm kind of gleaning with this conversation is like, we're looking at both sides of the football, right? And we're seeing so many new, moving, improved hopes for offense and defense. And so maybe, Jake, I'll start with you on this. Which side of the ball do you trust more at this point? Like, do you trust, David left. So now
he was done with that question. He wanted nothing to do with that.
I will not record again until someone moves me back into my rightful spot.
Okay, he's back. He's back. David made it back.
He came back for it.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Hey, we're
not feel bad, man. It makes me feel better. I'm not the only one with technical difficulties on this show, so thank you for that. Appreciate it.
But what I was asking was,
he's robbing the truck.
Which side of the ball do you trust more right now? Knowing what we know now, going into the season, let's fast forward to week 1. Which side of the ball do you trust to deliver?
I mean, you'd have to just say on the surface level because you've seen the results from Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman working together previously. So you have to give them the advantage in that circumstance. While everybody is excited about Jesse Minter and what they're going to do with this defense, and trust me, I'm one of them 1,000%, you'd have to go with the offense because that's the proven results. And to Daniel's point, there's still a lot of question marks as it relates to this defense. So while we all expect Jesse Minter to come and give us a much better defensive product than we had under the Brandon Staley era, there's still going to be some things that are going to be ironed out. But here's what I'll tell you I will trust, Dan, from the defensive side of the ball. I will trust Jesse Minter to adapt. And I will trust Jesse Minter to call better situational plays for this defense. We've heard that from Mike Elston. And one of the biggest issues for the Chargers over the last 2 years defensively was being able to adapt to what another team does. And whether we're just talking about it from a half-to-half basis, quarter-to-quarter basis, they just were never ready for the opposing team's counterpunch, and they can never adapt to that. And hence why you've seen why Justin Herbert has had a terrible defense essentially since he's been in the league statistically. So that facet I will trust from Jesse Minter, but you got to give it to the offense right now.
Okay, so David, then what would you say, which side of the ball has improved more, offense or defense?
I mean, I see improvements on both sides of the ball, to be quite honest with you. I feel
obviously, but which one's more? Which one you got to put your hat on one side. Other.
Yeah, offense. I mean, I'm definitely on with the offense. I feel like the running back room is much better. The schemes are going to be much better. The offensive line, I think, is improved with better resources and better depth there, with Jamari Sawyer kind of being that swing tackle, swing guard, a guy that can play kind of multiple positions on that offensive line. And then, yeah, there's a lot of differences in the wide receiver room, but I feel like there are guys there that can definitely provide some quality snaps. And then the tight end room is vastly improved, with the blocking capacity. And I feel like there are capable pass catchers in that room as well. So I feel like the offense to me is a little bit of a step up. There's just less questions, like, Jake said, on the offense for me, as opposed to the defense, where I feel like there's a couple of things that we need to see before we can really believe.
See, and Daniel, that scares me. That scares me because as much as we want to complain about the offense, the offensive line, and the struggles they had last year, that is not why this team lost as many games as they did. Like, the defense was atrocious and gave up so many things. And if the defense has not improved more than the offense, whether by personnel or by coaching, this team's in trouble. Do you agree?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that coaching-wise, the defense got better than the offense did. I mean, Greg Roman is an absolute master at what he's done. He's been also fired as an offensive coordinator 3 times in the NFL, right? Jesse Minter, guess how many times he's been fired as defensive coordinator? 0 times. No, I can make an argument for the defense. This is the thing. I think for Chargers fans, especially for all of us who've been covering the team through the entire Staley era and into the Anthony Lynn area and whenever that became, you started, it's hard to buy back in again, right? Like, Brandon Staley was supposed to fix all the problems. Brandon Staley was the defensive mastermind, and I know you guys get the comments into the YouTube as much as we do, where it's like people are hesitant to buy in on someone like Jesse Minter getting much more from his players without actually getting the top-end talent that he might need to turn it around. Because, I mean, let's be honest. Where did the Chargers spend their first 2 picks? They took an offensive lineman with the 5th overall pick, and they traded up for a wide receiver. They didn't address the defense until the 3rd round. And as much as I like Junior Colson, right, they didn't put a bunch there. You have a small contract to Kristian Fulton, a smaller contract to Poona Ford. You bring in Bud Dupree. You get a lot of pieces, but what's the big addition to the defensive side? Like, most of it, I think you're arguing, in the draft you got Junior Colson, Justin Aboigbe, you have Tarheeb Still and Cam Hart. That's a lot to put on rookies as far as, like, hoping that's where your biggest improvements are going to come from. Like, that is really a lot to ask. I do agree with Jake, though, as far as there is a difference between Brandon Staley and Jesse Minter, and the biggest thing that I've tried to tell people the entire offseason is his people came with him, which is a huge boost.
Good
Brandon
point.
Staley came in and brought Derek Ansley from Tennessee and Ronaldo Hill from Denver. Like, none of those guys came with him from the Los Angeles Rams when he became the Chargers head coach. The other thing is Jesse Minter isn't worried about not melting down at the post-game press conference, right? Like, he
or
is
the offense,
defense, he's the defensive coordinator, and that's it. He's not going to worry about why, the team called the timeout in overtime against the Raiders. That's not Jesse Minter's job. He has a singularly focused mindset of how he is going to attack this defense without having to worry. There's good coordinators all the time. Being a head coach is very different. Trying to be a defensive play calling head coach is incredibly hard. Jesse Minter's not worried about that. He's just worried about his defense. And the other thing is one thing that we continually saw over Brandon Staley, as many times as we heard put the roof over the defense or whatever terminology you wanted to use, there were broken plays left and right. And Brandon Staley, just as every defensive guy who comes in the room said, was, we're going to adjust to our best players.
Never
They didn't. They didn't. They just, so much so that they said, let's go bring in players I actually know play well in this, because I'm not going to be able to build it around what you have here. And there wasn't a ton of talent outside of the big names to begin with. And that's, fair or unfair. But Jesse Minter has his people. And what that means is everyone is on the same page. There's no trickle down process where you're playing, telephone where Brandon Staley's saying this to Ronaldo Hill, and Ronaldo Hill saying this to Derek Ansley, and Derek Ansley saying this to Asante Samuel Jr. These guys are all on the same page because they've been running this defense for multiple years. There are some new coaches. The majority of this staff is Jesse Minter's staff, and I just think the importance of that and hoping that you're going to get more out of these players. If you want to make the argument for it, I would start right there.
Not to make your ego any larger than it may already be, Daniel, but Joey Bosa just today was saying that exact thing about how it starts from the top, things trickle down, there's no loss in translation, it's all coming straight.
I don't have to record Locked On Chargers until the Friday show, so I haven't seen those yet. But no, I think it's huge. I saw some things going around from Joey Bosa, and I couldn't agree more. And the thing about Brandon Staley's defense was this too, he wanted it to be perfect. He wanted it to be perfect, and perfect is just unattainable at the NFL level. Every once in a while, you'll get a game like the Miami Dolphins in 2022 where he absolutely undressed Tua Tagovailoa on national television, right? Every once in a while, you'll get that game. But every other time, you're talking about a defense that's looking for perfection, and if one player's playing the wrong leverage on any given play, you have a busted play that goes for 40-plus yards. And to go to Jake's point, every single time you got into an end-of-game situation with closers on your defense like Derwin James and Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack and all these dudes, everyone had the answer. It was the easiest thing to ever decipher in the world, because every time a defense needed points, and now Justin Herbert's taking slander because every offense in the league knew what to do against Brandon Staley's defense when it was a late-game situation and the pass rushers couldn't get home and offenses knew exactly where to go. Go look at half of the games from last season. You'll see the same thing. Justin Herbert keeps it tight. Justin Herbert puts you ahead for the defense to immediately collapse in almost record-breaking time. We've seen it happen time and time again. So I think the game day play calling, to Jake's point, huge difference, because when it got to late game situations against Brandon Staley, and you try to think back about how many times his defense made a stand,
he failed.
A miraculous Nick Neiman interception in the end zone, or a miraculous Alohi Gilman against Jacoby Brissett interception in the end zone. You needed guys to make miraculous plays because teams were driving down the field easily. Go look at that Lions game. Go look at that Packers game, right? That was the start of the Jordan Love era right there.
Week 1.
The Dolphins, over and over again, we saw it. There was no team that ever had a problem moving the ball against the Chargers defense late in games and late in those late game situations, and you have to hope that is better under Jesse Minter, and from everyone's words, it should be.
If this was around the horn right now, we should have hit the fire graphic for a behind wave on that one.
Oh yeah, don't get him going.
I wish there was a point system. Why isn't there a points-based system?
Once he gets started, man, it's hard to stop.
That's an idea.
First of all, I have a light. That's a point right there. I didn't leave the call. That's a point right there. I'm at least up 1-on-1 from David and Jake.
And he's got a red-headed beard, so that's another point automatically.
Let me retract my statement.
Well, okay, so David, then, what is your bar set for the defense then? What are your expectations? What's the baseline that it has to be at least? It could be metrics. It could just be eye tests. But what are you expecting?
Can I just say competent? I just want it to be
fair.
competent. Just be
fair.
middle of the pack. Just
average.
be average. Just to see a bottom 5 defense of the last 5 years has been just nauseating, and it's been so annoying to see, like, you know, what Dan said, every single time they've been put in the situation to have to close the game out, they have not been able to do it at all. Whether that's the players on the field or the coaching staff and the play calling, all of that has not married up. I just want them to be competent. Don't play those off coverages when it's third and 9, 3rd and 10. Don't play the fence defense.
Or
like,
3rd
get rid
and
of
1.
that stuff.
Yeah, maybe not 7 yards of cushions on 3rd and 1.
Please.
I mean, I have a 2-month-old. Like, I see poop every day. That defense was poop, David. I think asking for average is very, very fair.
That's all I want. Like, just
know
blowouts.
Right
know
now.
what you're doing.
Right.
Like, and be able to make adjustments. I think that's one of the biggest things for me is noticing when you need to make the adjustments and doing it quick enough to make a difference in that particular game. That's when we did not see that enough under Brandon Staley. That has to change under Jesse Minter. You have to be able to make competent adjustments in game, because that's the difference between wins and losses in the National Football League. So be able to stop the run, be able to limit the explosive plays, for crying out loud. God, please. Be able to have somebody on the back end that is a competent last line of defense type of defender, and be able to accentuate your strengths. Just like Dan said, if you can't stop the run on 1st and 2nd down, you can't utilize the biggest strength of your defense, which is the best edge rushers in the NFL, period. Be able to accentuate your strengths and put yourself in a position to utilize them. Just be competent. That's all I'm asking for, and I guarantee you will see much better results from Justin Herbert, who has put this team in position to win way more games than he has actually won because of that defense.
Yeah, we've reached the point of the episode where emotions are starting to run high, and I think it's because we want to see this team succeed, and we've seen this team fail so many different ways in miraculous fashion, in ways that it shouldn't. Like, some of this is very basic stuff that we're hoping this team can figure out. And it seems as though they have a staff that is competent enough and has enough brain trust collectively to bring out the best in themselves as coaches and the players. A couple more for you. I know we're going a little long here, but hashtag y'all worth it. I think it's interesting to me because there's so much hype around this team, both nationally and locally. Like, everyone's talking. Anytime Jim Harbaugh breathes, it's like national news at this point. And rightly so. Like, this team has a lot of buzz because of all the changes and successes that have come to this franchise. But I think that there's still concerns, like valid concerns and valid holes that this team has. Jake, start with you. Biggest concern. We can't reuse ones. So biggest concern headed into whether that's training camp or whether that is week 1. What say you?
Biggest concern. I feel like I'd almost be just retorting back what Daniel was talking about with the interior defensive line. But in general, you know, it's I'll say it like this, Dan. I'll almost kind of reverse Uno card here. You're worried. You may be worried just from the standpoint that this coaching staff was literally ripped down to its foundations and rebuilt up, and now you have all of these new faces and new places, even though a lot of them come from the same college in Michigan, so a lot of them are very familiar with one another, i.e. Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh from their days in San Francisco, and now with the retooled roster. Dan, we even had Haley Elwood on the show when she said, I have never had to look at a roster so much before to see which number corresponded with which player. I've never had a season like that, and that just shows the turnover in this in a single season. So while I have all the faith in the world that Jim Harbaugh is going to create a winner for this Chargers team, I think you just have to temper the expectations a little bit. There's still going to be some hiccups, whether that's from a coaching standpoint or a player standpoint. There's going to be those heartbreaking losses. It's going to happen. We're going to see that happen. But this is a coaching staff that I think, as far as the message that Jim Harbaugh has put in since his introductory press conference to the things that you're seeing now with Ben Herbert coming talking about the attention to detail, the getting ready in game uniform, tucking your jersey into your pants, these new drills that we're seeing during minicamp and OTAs with the tarp and on the spot having people talk about something as from a leadership standpoint. It's creating a mindset. So even with all that, I believe that is going to turn this team around and into a winner. But I think it's for those who think that the Chargers are just going to hit the ground running and we're going to see a 15-3 season or whatever the hell it is. I think we should just temper the expectations a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's hard to do that sometimes, though, when you have a head coach that went to 3 straight NFC Championship games, right? I think it's just those expectations come from what he's been able to produce. But, yeah, I think that's fair. As far as, for me, the biggest remaining concerns, more positionally for me, backup safety. I think that third safety position is definitely a concern for me. The slot corner position, I want to see what's going to make of that, who's going to be able to take the bull by the horns there. The interior defensive line is definitely a big question mark. And then I'm going to throw this other one. This one we haven't talked about at all. Backup quarterback. I think it's something I would like to see them bring in some more competition for Easton Stick. I feel like there's something that can be done there. I think there's a veteran that could be brought in to make you feel a little bit better in the event that anything happens. Obviously, God forbid, but you want somebody to be able to have, some semblance of an ability to try to keep things afloat. And I don't know if Easton Stick showed that to me in his playing time that he had last year. So those are some positions I think I'm a little bit concerned about.
Does Tony Jefferson fix that backup safety role for you?
Let's see what he has, right? He didn't play any football at all last year. He was a scout for the Baltimore Ravens, and so you haven't seen him play, quality football snaps in several seasons. So he's got to show that he's competent. He's got to show that he's in shape, and he's got to earn a contract before anything else. So that hasn't happened. He's still in a tryout situation here. So we'll see if he gets that contract. We'll see if he impresses enough, and we'll see if he does. If he does, then he has a legitimate chance to grab that backup safety spot for sure.
And Daniel, I'll ask you this. I hear a lot of people, David talked about it too, thank you for the permission, the slot corner being a need, which I guess, but in my opinion, outside corner, what are we trusting right now? You're trusting Kristian Fulton or Cam Hart as one of your outside corners? To me, that's the bigger one. And if you bring in a veteran outside corner, that then slots everybody down one, and then your slot corner could then be Asante, Jazir Taylor, and or Tarheeb. So let them battle it out. To me, outside corner is a bigger one. But what say you in terms of biggest concerns?
I think that's a great point you're bringing up about the cornerback position. I think that's all fair. I think just looking at the grand scheme of things, first of all, hey, go sign Stephon Gilmore and Justin Simmons, and we won't have nearly as many questions this year. That'd be nice. I have the answers. Those are the answers. There you go. Do that, we'll be fine. Mine is more general and overarching, and I think maybe it's more to what Jake's point was, just about tempering expectations. And as being super good friends with Chargers superfan Athier, it's hard to temper expectations with this fan base right now because they all want to see the playoffs and a deep playoff run in year one. And yes,
which we're going to get to.
Did take, and those projections is fine. My thing about as far as what my biggest concern would be, you're counting on so many dudes to bounce back, and I've said it and I'll say it again, and I've said it over and over again. The
reclamation projects.
You can hope, and I think that Bradley Bozeman will be much better this year than he was in the dumpster fire that was Carolina last year, right? You can hope that Hayden Hurst, same thing, and DJ Chark and Kristian Fulton and Bud Dupree, and but how many guys, Denzel Perryman, another one, right? How many guys are you really banking on to be so much better in your scheme because they just played poorly in 2023? I think if you looked at the list of guys that they have listed as starters right now that played at a below average level in 2023, you'd be looking at a pretty long list of players, right? So I think when you're I am very bullish, and I think it's just great that so many players wanted to go to the Chargers to rehab their image, right? That trusted the Chargers to take a small deal so that they can get money on the backside of this because they think that this is the best place for them to show that they can play much better than they did last season. But that's a lot of dudes that you're hoping can bounce back from pretty subpar 2023 years.
I mean, you're not wrong. And the offseason hype always is at an all-time high at this point, going into training camp, all that jazz. Like, this is when I think every team across the league, their fans are expecting and hoping for Super Bowls. Like, that's kind of comes with territory. Let's stay on the theme then. Off-season hype. Well, we're going to steal a little. Ooh, we're going to Aladdin style. This
is how you get Justin Simmons. Stephon Gilmore, we have one more wish for the genie's lamp.
Everybody about the lamp.
I'm once curious,
you do it, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Justin Simmons, Stephon Gilmore, we have one more.
We have one more in the holster. Okay. Off-season hype. Buy or sell. I think you guys do this, what is it, once a week, right? You have the segment on your show?
Buy or sell? Yeah, we do a buy or sell show every week. Yes.
Okay, so I don't know if you've done this. If you have, you could just repeat your answer here. I'm not sure. But I have a few ones here. Let's go quickly. We have two more questions. This one more. Okay. Buy or sell. I had Ladd McConkey on here, but I think we all are going to buy that.
I'm buying that.
We're going to buy that hype. Next one on here. Asante Samuel Jr. Again, blowing up camp. Ball production, same as always. Are we buying that this one's different?
That's a tough one. Yeah, I think I'll buy in on Asante Samuel Jr. hype. I think that there's certain things, like I think in reality, he's much closer to Marcus Peters than he is to a Darrelle Revis, right? As far as like his style of game, where I think it's always going to be some give and take with him. And I think that if he can become that 5 or 6 interception a year type of player, you're going to feel a lot better about the missed tackles and the missed assignments in run defense and things like that, which is fine. But you got to get the good parts of it too. And I do think that is a guy that if you put him in man-to-man coverage, he is going to win a lot of those matchups and has shown that he can do that in this league 3 years into it. And I do think you can reasonably expect, when he's not thinking so much about where his leverages is and trying to be perfect, that I think you could see a better version. I would buy that on Asante Samuel Jr.
I'm buying it as well, just because he has every reason to explode and break out, because this is a contract year for him, right? I think you got to remember that. If he goes out there and he proves that you can be the guy, look at the contracts that cornerbacks are making. Like, they're making big money. So if he's able to put it all together in his 4th season, then he has every incentive to be able to go out there and do that. And I feel like with this edge group that they have, with that pass rush, I think they are going to unleash on the National Football League. They are going to be able to get some more interceptions for Asante Samuel Jr. I think that there's going to work hand in hand, so I'm going to buy that breakout.
Jake, are you buying?
I'm going to buy it as well, Dan. And again, as Daniel and David were talking about, you go back to last season, Asante Samuel Jr. started off great in training camp last year, and it looked like last year was going to be the season. And I know we like to talk about how many coordinators and coaches that Justin Herbert has rattled off or since he's been in the league, but now you look at the secondary coaches, it's been just as big of a revolving door with what's taken place. It's essentially the 3rd secondary coach that Asante Samuel Jr. in this cornerback group has had over the last 3 years. I feel like I trust the likes of Jesse Minter and Coach Clinkscale to get the best version out of Asante Samuel better. Why? They've worked together. They know exactly what it is that they want from their secondary. And as they have said, whether it's the secondary or any other position, they're going to put their guys in the position where they know that they can succeed. You're not going to come in here and ask Asante Samuel Jr. to come in and do anything that he can't do. Now, to Dan's point, there are still some gaps from Asante Samuel Jr. that need to improve, namely the run defense, namely the tackling that he needs to improve. But overall, from his game and his play standpoint, and then putting him in the position where he needs to be, I'll buy that more from the coaching staff and how they can improve him for this year.
Okay, so then next one on my list here, fellas, is Quentin Johnson. And I'm going to set this one up here. I'm going to give us kind of some wiggle room.
Okay.
David, expectations, David. How many yards would be a good year for Quentin Johnston?
I have hope that they're going to use Quentin Johnston more effectively because of what I heard from Greg Roman in his press conference. He said, hey, we're going to put him in more of those run and catch situations. We also are going to throw a deep to him on occasion, but I feel like he understands what Quentin Johnston is and what he brings to the table. So with that being said, I feel like a productive season for Quentin Johnston would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 650 to 800 receiving yards. I feel like that's where my expectation is for him. That's where my hope, I would say, is for him. If he is used more effectively, I can see him go over that, but that's what I'd like to see in this second season for Quentin.
All right, so then we'll use David's window as the barometer here. Jake Hefner, buying or selling Quentin Johnston hype, and we'll set the bar 700 yards.
I'll buy that. 100%. I'll buy that. And again, we don't have to talk about the touchdown statistics or whatnot, but like David said, I think that the Chargers are going to utilize Quentin Johnston more than just a Mike Williams type of replacement. Jim Harbaugh knows what Quentin Johnston did to him in the playoffs against Michigan just a couple years ago. So he knows the best version that he can get out of Quentin Johnston. And no, it's not going to be some astronomical 1,000-yard season jump in year 2. But again, it can't get much worse than what it was in his rookie year. So if you find somewhere right in the middle, and in this type of an offensive scheme that as much as it's going to benefit Justin Herbert, I think it's going to benefit these wide receivers as well. Quentin Johnston will be the benefit of that. So, yeah, I'll buy it.
Am I going to have to be the bad guy?
There we go.
Someone has to.
Someone has to be a bad guy.
And
I'll sell it.
Give it to him, Razor.
I'm selling it. 700's a tough number because that is, I think, if you're looking at Las Vegas odds or something like that, I think that's a good over-under, right? But I'm going to sell the hype to a certain extent because, to me, we're talking about an offense that's going to be much more well-balanced, and I don't think it's going to take the steep cliff of targets away from the receivers that some people think it will. I mean, I think if you're looking historically at 1,000-yard wide receivers under Greg Roman offenses, you're going to find a pretty short list of a year of Michael Crabtree, a couple years of Anquan Bolden, maybe a year where Hollywood Brown got close to it but didn't make it, and then Mark Andrews had a year. There's not a lot. This is the other thing. What wide receiver is Quentin Johnston? Do you guys have him as wide receiver 1 for this offense this year?
That's where I'm leaning.
Do you have him as wide receiver 2 for this offense this upcoming season? Because I could see a world in which Joshua Palmer's wide receiver 1 and Ladd McConkey's wide receiver 2, and you can swap those if you want to, depending on who you're higher on. Do I think wide receiver 3 in a Greg Roman offense is going to go for 700 yards? They brought in DJ Chark for a reason. What is his role going to be in all this? I don't know. I think it's easy to sell the hype. I mean, I'm not there with Quentin Johnston yet. I need to see it, and I'm not going to be able to see it until we reach the regular season, and I just don't see this team getting put into a situation where they have to force feed Quentin Johnston targets. I think he'll be used much better. I think he's going to look a lot better than he did his rookie year. Do I think he's going to break out and be wide receiver 1 and, 700? Hey, maybe he could get that. I think that's a good season for him. Do I think he's going to have a 1,000-yard season? Absolutely not. I think he might be wide receiver 3 right now on the depth chart. When things are all said and done, I think it could be around there still. Yeah, maybe. Maybe it is. I think they'll use him better, but I think just tempering expectations is probably good with Quentin Johnston. He had a lot of improvements he needed to make from year 1 to year 2, and I think, people thinking he's going to have a 1,000-yard season and he's going to be a huge breakout star for the Chargers this year, I think they could be mildly disappointed, and I think they could be disappointed and he can still have a huge improvement, and there's still some gray area in between those two things.
I think sometimes, and oftentimes in the NFL, less is more. And I think I see this similarly to what we're hoping to see with Justin Herbert, where we're hoping to not see him sling it 50, 60 times a game. Right. And sometimes less is more, and you can be more effective in the role that you have without having to do it every single time. I'm going to sell this too. And not because, or not for any negative feelings towards my belief in Quentin Johnston, but just the opportunities that are going to be there. You mentioned, I would argue, is the third receiver even going to be a receiver in this offense? Because historically, it's been a tight end. And so a lot of mouths to feed. right? Not many meals to be had, especially when we're including the tight ends plus Quentin, Josh Palmer, Ladd McConkey, who everyone's gushing over right now, and DJ Chark, who, in my opinion, is a wide receiver 1 candidate, asterisk, when healthy. You can make the case all 4 of those receivers could be wide receiver 1s, at least, or make the argument for it. Should they? I don't know.
Any one of those 4 could end the season with the most receiving yards on the team. You know, you might think some have a better chance than others, but I get what you're saying there.
Greg Roman's also never had a Justin Herbert, though.
100%.
Exactly.
And I'm not, but do I think that Justin's going to be throwing for 5,500 yards and 45 touchdowns this year? Like, absolutely not. I
also don't think we're going to see him throw for 2,700 yards, right? So it's like there's going to be more yards to get than what we've seen in some of Greg Roman's offense before. But David, where's Quentin Johnson? I can see you're getting a little defensive. You know, I get it, and I like Quentin Johnson too. Where is Quentin Johnson slotted in your list of wide receivers right now?
In terms of targets, maybe not watching 1, 2, 3, 4, but
it's probably third. It's probably third. I mean, it's probably third for me.
So you have DJ Chark 4th?
Probably.
Are you putting Josh Palmer, Ladd McConkey, in some order ahead of him?
Yeah.
Right. So that's the thing is like, when's the last time the Chargers wide receiver 3 had 700 plus yards? Right. In an offense that was throwing it much more. I can tell you when it was Josh Palmer in 2021. Right. But what I'm saying is that was an offense or 2022, I should say, that was an offense that was throwing it a lot more. You know what I mean? So like having a wide receiver 3 in an offense that's running the ball a lot more, that's going to be, tough numbers to put up, even if he has a better season.
Yeah, but I feel like he's going to be put in better situations to succeed because they can see what he can do and what he can't do and what he should be doing. So I feel like the utilization,
but then you also have 2 more other receivers more than 700 yards. You think the Chargers are going to have 3 700-plus yard receivers this year?
I feel like there's a very good chance that they will have multiple receivers in that $700 to $800 range and none in the $1,000-plus range.
I've got the solution. Justin Herbert is secretly ambidextrous, and he will be taking 2 footballs off the hike and distributing them so everybody gets an opportunity.
Yeah.
But what I was going to close with that part of Quentin Johnson was, let's say he goes 600. I don't think that necessarily is going to mean it's a bad season. I think he could look great with 600 yards receiving. I think it's about the opportunities that are there to be had and him being able to take advantage of those opportunities. The more time he takes advantage of them, the more opportunities are going to be given. So
I'm with you.
Just because I'm selling the 700 doesn't mean I'm selling Quentin Johnston wildly improved. Yeah, that's it. Last one for you guys. Not hype, buy or sell. Is this team going to the playoffs? First year. So hype. Chargers going to the playoffs 2024. Jake, buy or sell? We can go quick on this one.
I'm going to buy it. And I think that there are some things advantageously that are working for the Chargers, namely the schedule. I know from a standpoint of jet travel and where they have to go on certain road trips, they're doing that the most out of any team in the league. But, with like I said earlier, there are going to be some hiccups every now and again throughout the season. But I think they're going to be good enough to go to the playoffs. I think especially when you hear comments like Khalil Mack said today, I signed back with the team to be playing in January. And Jim Harbaugh had a lot to do with that. And Dan, it's the mindset of things. And as Daniel said earlier, it's hard to buy in to this team when we have not seen them take a single snap with this unit together after we have watched the last 4 years with disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. I understand why you may be hesitant to go that far in saying that. But Trevor Sikkema said that Jim Harbaugh has won everywhere that he's been, and whatever it is that he wants to do, it's going to work. And it already seems like in OTAs and minicamp and football in June that these little details that we keep hearing about are already starting to take root in these guys for what's going to happen during the regular season.
I'm buying it as well. David, Dan, are you guys both buying it?
I'm buying it for sure. I've said it already. I feel like the running game is going to be a big reason in that. They're going to be able to grind teams out. They're going to be able to close out football games. I feel like the defense is going to give away a lot less football games. And overall, I think they're going to be much better coached under Jim Harbaugh. And the schedule definitely lends itself to them making it to the playoffs. So I'm buying it.
I'm selling it. I think this is a 6-win football team. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to say that. We haven't done that. I mean, you know, I've said consistently from the beginning, like, I would be shocked if the Chargers aren't competing for a playoff spot. Obviously, you know, we're going to assume in this conversation we're talking about a very healthy season from Justin Herbert, because I think to David's point about Easton Stick, the Chargers are going with the strategy of, hey, guess what? We're effed if Justin Herbert is now here regardless. That's just what it is. He's that good, and you're not going to be able to replace him with anyone behind him. I'll buy it. I'll say this is a playoff football team, and I think that is really, I don't say that lightly, because the AFC is a total blender. You have teams like, you know, the Texans totally on the up and up to go against the, you know, the Jaguars, who have been there around the playoffs the last few years, to go with an AFC North that has potentially, you know, 4 borderline playoff type of teams in it, with the Browns, the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Bengals, right? With a healthy Joe Burrow potentially. I think the reason I'm buying it is because I do not believe in the Raiders or the Broncos at all. I'm as big of a pessimist on those two teams as you're going to find. I think the Raiders are going to be a total mess, whether it's Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell that they put out there. And I think they're going to rue and wish that they went and made a huge pursuit of Jim Harbaugh instead of just rolling with Antonio Pierce, because that's what the players wanted to do. I think the Broncos, hey, Bo Nix, maybe he's a good fit for the Broncos. Sure. You have messes everywhere all around that outside of the quarterback position. So year one rookie quarterback that probably shouldn't have been a first-round pick as the Broncos' main guy from week one potentially, or maybe they go with, you know, Zach Wilson. Maybe it's Zach Wilson. I don't know. Those teams, maybe I'm naive, do not scare me. So I think that's a boost. Obviously, getting the NFC South to me is a huge gain for the Chargers. You never know how the schedule is going to play out. I always get a little, you know, I don't like taking the easiest schedule argument too seriously, right? Just because a couple years ago, 2022, the hardest part of the Chargers schedule was at the end of the year, and they had the Rams, who were coming off the Super Bowl, and the Colts, who had Jonathan Taylor, who were going to expose their bad run defense because they had one of the best running attacks in the league, and they had the Dolphins, all these teams. And then they came to the end of the season, and they were going up against Nick Foles and the Colts, right? And then they were going up against like Baker Mayfield and the Rams, right? Like, so you just never know those things. I do think it's a favorable schedule for them. We'll see how good these teams really end up being. But it just, to me, it's this. If you have a losing season with Justin Herbert as your quarterback, it's a failure 100 times out of 100. If you have Justin Herbert and the quarterbacks of Justin Herbert's level make the playoffs every single season. So the fact that we haven't seen him in the playoffs in 3 of his 4 professional seasons is such a blight on this organization and such a shame on you type of a situation to me, because that is crazy to me. Last year, okay, he was hurt. You weren't making the playoffs if Justin Herbert played the last 4 games last year. So I count it, right? It's a shame if you don't make the playoffs with a quarterback the level of Justin Herbert. And we see him every game, so we know how to appreciate him. And you now with Jim Harbaugh every year with Jim Harbaugh. So if you're going to tell me you have those two guys together and that's not a playoff team, that is unequivocally a disappointment. I get it, right? The roster's not perfect. There's big questions to be answered. You have Justin Herbert and you have Jim Harbaugh, and that's enough for me to buy this on this buy or sell today, because if you don't make the playoffs with those two dudes, you're telling me that Jim Harbaugh can make it to 3 straight NFC championship games with Colin Kaepernick and Alex Smith, but he can't make the playoffs with Justin Herbert as quarterback? Get that out of there. I'm not buying that at all. I think this is a playoff team in 2024.
Wade is really pushing for the around the horn points right now.
Yes.
There's not even points I'm still giving it to you.
I was just going to say you would emphatically be in the lead, sir. That's all I'm telling you.
I'm upset that we had so much hurt that it's hard for us to buy in. Like, it sucks that I can't just full bore just be like, yes, cocky, in your face, this is a new team, they're going to prove everyone wrong, the genie is out of the bottle, and now the Chargers are going to make the playoffs and be as good as they're supposed to be every season. Brandon Staley blew a 27-0 lead. Can we talk about it in the playoffs against the Jacksonville Jaguars? No one wants to talk about it. Let's talk about it. Is Jim Harbaugh going to blow that lead? Absolutely not. Is Jesse Minter going to blow that lead? Absolutely not. Is Greg Roman going to run for -2 yards in the second half? Absolutely not. Let's talk about it. This team and what they've done with Justin Herbert has been an injustice in an injustice. It's shameful. Shame on them for
Shame.
having Justin Herbert not have a playoff win to that point,
Shame.
this point in his career.
Shame.
This ragtag bunch of former Carolina Panthers, along with Jim Harbaugh, are going to take this team to the playoffs in 2024 bucket.
I now understand what Dan used to see in me whenever I would get like triggered or upset through my pessimism. And now we've got Daniel Wade over here, and I can hear the genie bottle, being flung on the TV, his water bottle being flung over on the table, and all the emotions coming out, and I love it.
Yeah.
Yep. Look, you said GTFO.
That's why they only let me talk for 30 minutes at a time on Locked On. You know what I mean? They don't ever let me go past that. This is
right.
why.
We got the straight jacket on him for good reason.
Yeah.
David's been shot calling me this whole time. I'm fighting through it.
Okay, let's GTFO on this one. We basically, after this week, it's kind of ghost town for the Chargers. They have like 6 weeks where they can go
For you guys.
on vacation. They can go do whatever they want. They probably should be still working out and training and stuff, which most of them probably will. We will still be here. We will still be doing content, but let's kind of fast forward to training camp. Okay, we'll get out of here with this. Each one has to give a new one. Position battle that you are most looking forward to. And David, start with you.
Position battle I am most looking forward to is going to be the wide receiver group. I already said it earlier. I mean, come on now. I want to see what the back end of that wide receiver group is going to look like. I think it is going to be one of the fiercest in all of Chargers training camp. We don't know who is going to make this room. There's 11 bodies that are in that group that are vying for maybe 6 spots, right? So I feel like they've done an excellent job of collecting the amount of talent that they have at that position and really seeing where or who is going to rise to the top and grab one of those 6 spots.
Daniel Wade, what say you?
It's a good question because, like, for a team who has as much turnover as the Chargers have this season, there's not as many, especially, if Jim Harbaugh is going to be out here saying, hey, the offensive line starters are set before the pads even come on, right? Like, so that takes away a few of those potential training camp battles, at least according to what he's saying, right, on the surface. I think that no need to apologize, Dan. It's long. It's fine. It's okay. I'm letting you behind, breaking the fourth wall here.
It's like
Dan,
3
sorry
shows
it took so long. It's this long because of me. I have a baby now. I'm a little crazy now. You guys haven't had me in a while. If I'm looking at the position battles, mostly it comes on the defensive side of things. I'll go with the cornerback room. I think Tarheeb Still versus Jasir Taylor, a dude who, Jasir Taylor got benched last year and, obviously has showed some promise up until that point, but that's a position that I think going into the offseason, you say, hey, you need competition there, right? Yeah, Derwin will get some snaps there, all that stuff. You probably should get some competition so you're not just, it's Jasir Taylor and you have all your eggs in the Jasir Taylor basket. Yeah. So I think Tarheeb Still, who I believe picked off Justin Herbert today, had a couple of more pass breakups. Love to see that. I'm excited for that battle. I also think the cornerback 3 spot, and when I say cornerback 3, I mean the next outside corner up behind Kristian Fulton and behind Asante Samuel Jr. is super interesting to me because I think it probably will be Dean Leonard, who I think has showed some promise, but there's just no sort of sample size that you could ever feel good about making the argument for him as a former 7th round pick. Going up against Cam Hart, who by all accounts is a great player who dropped because of, 3 shoulder surgeries in his career. So I think who that next guy is, whether they have to come in because of the poor play of either Asante Samuel Jr. or Kristian Fulton on the other side, or they have to be forced into action because of injuries, that's going to be an important position for me. That whoever that next outside cornerback up is going to get some snaps this year. Who wins that battle is going to be a very, very interesting battle for me to see. Jake?
Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Other Dan. I think Cameron Dicker should be looking over his shoulder. He has a lot of competition that is right behind him.
Spit my water out.
I was going to say Justin Herbert, but you stole a Dicker.
Max Duggan's coming.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think it's the running back stable for me. I mean, I agree with both of the positions that David and Daniel were talking about, but running backs, I don't know that you're going to be able to keep 4 running backs again with this roster and this competition because I don't see the Chargers keeping any less than 6 receivers on this roster. And with the way that that this team is investing in the blocking tight ends, how many are you going to carry in that stable? So
Isaiah Spiller's not making the team.
Is Isaiah Spiller going to be the odd man out? And right now it looks like it very well could be that way. And it's unfortunate, not from the standpoint of him not playing well. He just has gotten an unfair shake because he hasn't gotten the opportunity to see the field. So it may be one of those tough pills to swallow by the time that we get to the end of August, especially if Isaiah Spiller just goes out there and just knocks it out of the park in the preseason. But at the same time, you're going to have to sacrifice one of these positions, but I'm hoping that at the end of the day, what it's going to do is it's going to breed a hell of a lot of competition between Edwards, Dobbins, Vidal, and Spiller.
I thought about going with the sexy one and going with a linebacker core to see, like, is Junior Colson going to start? Are we finally going to see the Dayon and Junior Colson duo? Like, but I'm going to go with the unsexy one. I'm going to go with a tight end room. And I think this is one, and I'm not necessarily worried about tight end 1-2, but
sure.
I don't know how many tight ends are going to be on this team. I don't know who tight end 3, 4, 5 is. We've heard glimpses of Zach Hines balling out. We're seeing Stone Smart still doing his thing. You're not hearing anything about Donald Parham because he's been out, I think, maybe injury, I believe.
Yeah, it
I
is.
saw something about that yesterday.
Working through something. Yeah.
Yeah, so by the way, love what Jim Harbaugh does with that. He's given nothing. But the tight end group, you mentioned it earlier, Daniel, has been atrocious, especially in blocking. But honestly, in just production in general, it hasn't really been a strength of this team.
Yeah.
I don't know what this tight end group is going to look like, aside from Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst.
Yeah.
If Donald Parham doesn't make the team,
Agreed.
Wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah. No, I mean, first of all, I think Zach Hines has as much, maybe more of a chance of making this team than Stone Smart does, right? And that's a guy that was on the roster, obviously, last year, and maybe we're just all assuming is off the team at this point. Like, this is the thing is, like, there's going to be a reckoning with this team when that final cut day happens. You're going to see a lot of dudes that were drafted by Tom Telesco on the outside looking in. Because guess what? There's no flip that you can switch to become a physical team and to change from the finesse team that we've seen to the team that Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh and Joe Hortiz want to be, the team that other teams don't want to play every Sunday, right? You can't flip a switch. It has to happen personnel-wise. It has to happen in the philosophies and ideologies of whoever's, in this case, Jim Harbaugh, preaching the gospel.
Ben Herbert.
It also is going to be moving on from guys that maybe Tom Telesco and that regime were too attached to. I think it's going to shock some people. There's the genie lamp. I think it's going to shock some people when they see some of the names that are going to be left off of the opening 53-man roster. I think Chris Rumpf is gone. Chris Rumpf.
Oh, yeah. 100%
goodbye. Gone. Unless they keep, 5 edge rushers, I guess there's not a ton of competition there. Chris Rumpf is gone, right? Isaiah Spiller, potentially gone. How many? I think Ben Mason, where does he fit into this, right? Is he considered a tight end? If he's a fullback then and they want to keep a fullback, there's no competition for him. So if they want to keep a fullback, he's making the team. And
then way Isaiah Spiller is staying in that case.
Correct, exactly. Unless they say he's a tight end, then you're not going to have Stone Smart and Donald Parham on the team still. I promise you that, right? So
I think Stone Smart has a hard time anyway.
Stone Smart, Chris Rumpf, Isaiah Spiller. Right. If there was any sort of competition, JT Woods, I think, would be in this conversation as well. Like, I think there's going to be a reckoning day on this team, and there's going to be a lot of familiar places, familiar faces that are going to be finding new places to play, because I think there are a lot of people that, fans want to say, hey, this guy never got a chance. Those guys might not ever get a chance, right? Like, we'll see what happens, but I think there's going to be an exodus on this team, and I think a lot of guys, like an Isaiah Spiller, fair or not, are going to be on the outside looking in.
And honestly, that's what I think is probably more box office for me, is getting the popcorn ready for that day of reckoning at the end of training camp. Because we have seen training camps where there's maybe one name that's a surprise, or there's like the roster bubble where there's a couple names in flux. This one, you could go half a dozen deep of guys that can easily not make the team that in previous years were locks. And that's what's going to make these training camp battles so heated, not just to cover, but for the players in it. Like, they know if we're talking about it, you don't think that Chris Rumpf and Isaiah Spiller and Donald Parham and all these guys don't realize the heat on their seat right now? Like, it's clear. So who fits the scheme? Who's going to win it? It's kind of a mano-a-mano kind of cutthroat, but that's what this is. It's a business.
I'm here for it. Let's go.
Jim Harbaugh's business is winning. His business is booming. And if you're not winning, you're not going to stay. So I'm with you. I think this training camp is going to be wild. And there's going to be so much drama that Chargers fans aren't used to seeing in training camp. Like we make up drama sometimes, right? Like we talk about, remember like the wide receiver drama that we saw? We thought someone would make the roster. And
I would never do that.
That is not the case anymore. Like this is going to be real.
I don't make up drama. I'm just dramatic.
Right.
Put that on a t-shirt. Fellas, I know we went crazy along here. I apologize. I asked too many questions. That's on me. Put it in the comments. Blame Dan Wolkenstein.
I'm blaming Daniel Wade.
Yeah, I think we all know where the comments are going to go with this one. But hey, I'll be the villain.
So if this was around the horn, he got the mute button. He was the one that had to just
for sure.
Stop talking while
I won by points, but I also got muted the most times.
The points were so high, the mutes didn't even matter.
Someone's got to fill time while Jake gets his lights on. Someone's got to fill time when David exits the stream on accident. Like somebody's got to be the villain here. Somebody's got to sell the Quentin Johnston hype. And today, that man was me. And I'll take it. I'll take whatever everyone give all your praise to Dan Wolkenstein and Jake Hefner and David Drogemeyer. They were all lovely today. It was me you don't like. And I'll do it again too.
Hey, this is why we
D-Wade taking the villain
on here.
Yes. Fellas, all right. So 6 weeks of darkness. We're obviously Charbaugh. Oh, nice. I love that. What do you guys got cooking between now and training camp? I know this is when content creators are really digging deep.
Oh yeah.
What can folks expect?
What are you guys doing next week? You know what I mean? Yeah, we're going down to 3 shows a week up until borderline training camp time. So we got 4 more weeks after this one where we'll be down to 3 shows a week, and that's back up to 5 days a week. But
Crazy.
Hey, this is the time where Chargers fans earn their keep around here a little bit. We love getting the fans and as much as we can involved with the show. So it's voicemails, it's buy or sell days, getting the fans involved. It's fan mail Fridays. It's all that good stuff. And, we'll see what happens. It's training camp battles, all of those things. It's a long off season, a lot to get to, and getting great guests like potentially you guys back on the show again. I mean, that's, I think, a lot of what's going to be lined up these next, 6 weeks as we enter the dark ages of Chargers football.
That's it.
Hashtag preview. David, are you coming out to training camp this year? Are we going to see you again?
I am not coming out to training camp this year. I can't make it. I'm taking my one vacation earlier in July. My mom wants to take my son out to Disneyland.
Never say never.
Okay,
so,
then you have.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, right?
Never say never.
Yeah,
Disneyland is awfully close. Just saying.
Yeah, but it's before training camp starts.
Okay,
so.
okay.
Yeah. We'll say maybe, but more than likely not.
Look up the term extended stay and then come back to me and see what you think.
Yeah.
Or just fork out $10,000, take your son to Disneyland for a month.
I will be at training camp with a baby strapped to my chest like the guy from The Hangover.
Little
Carlos, Daniel Wade and Dylan Wade.
Binoculars,
on location.
baby on the chest, baby stroller pushing through. You never know. You'll see me there. I'll be there.
Dad life. I love it. Fellas, it's been so much fun. It's always a blast having you guys on. Never short of drama and emotions on this. You guys are the best. For the Locked On Chargers, fellas, for David, Dan, Jake, this has been so much fun. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time on Chargers Unleashed. We'll talk to you guys soon, everybody. See ya.